welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess, and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend because, hey, it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Keith Ward, and joining me is Larry Seltzer. He is an experienced technology writer and security expert who holds a CISSP certification and is also a software developer. What that means is that few people are better positioned to discuss the issue of DevSecOps than Larry. Larry, welcome.
Okay, thank you, Keith.
Okay, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Okay, well, dig in here. It wasn't until about 20 years ago that the idea of taking security seriously as part of the software development process became a mainstream thing. There had been products and languages, Java among them, that were oversold as inherently more secure, but the idea of making security part of the software development process didn't really grow until the major dev tool vendors, Microsoft especially, began to push it. Their security development lifecycle was a set of best practices and tools for implementing them. And this was a really good thing, a big improvement, especially on not caring about security. The real problem with the SDL, which you could think of as Development Security version 1, was that it created a big list of new things that development staffs needed to do and that programmers needed to learn in order to do their jobs. In short, security became a burden, something that got in the way. Software is supposed to be about increasing productivity, and the original SDL, at least by itself, could do the opposite. So then separately, about 10 years ago, frustration with inefficiencies resulting from the separation of the development and IT staffs led to a movement called DevOps for the integration of the two staffs into a single systems development lifecycle, which is the SDLC. The cycle goes from planning through coding, building, testing, releasing, deploying, operating or running the software in production. There's actually different names on this, on this graphic, but it amounts to the same thing. At every stage, feedback can flow between the steps of the cycle. And like any pipeline, it can lead to more frequent, even regular releases of software, and they should be incrementally better with each version. I'm going to take a moment here to point out that the idea of doing this with enterprise software would have been anathema, both to developers and IT decades ago. The earliest, most primitive form of it that I can recall is Netscape Navigator in the mid-90s, where the business model actually included releasing what were beta versions to the public and having them do the testing. And many of us in software development were appalled, but it was a successful model and everybody noticed. And the idea of automating the DevOps cycle, it's not inherent to it, but it quickly caught on. And we call this CI/CD for continuous integration and continuous delivery, or sometimes continuous deployment. Some of the steps are more automatable than others, but as with any productivity improvement, automation makes sense. And as with automation generally, not only does it make the process quicker, but it can improve quality. And I should have clicked to that earlier, but whatever. This is where the sec in DevSecOps comes in. The surest way to maximize security coverage is to automate it. In development, we call this shift left, meaning security becomes integrated into the cycle at earlier stages. Now, unlike with burger flippers, automation of security and DevOps cycle won't be putting anyone out of work. It's just going to make for faster delivery of a more secure product. And in fact, security can and should be integrated into every step of the cycle. Planning should include threat modeling. you should protect coding by having some way to scrutinize the open source libraries that make up as much as 90% of modern applications. Some of the most devastating software compromises, like SolarWinds a few years ago, came from a breach of the build system. So you need to protect those systems as much as possible. Once it's built, you have to test the complete finished product because its security characteristics aren't necessarily the same as those of individual components. When you're releasing a new version, you might actually be willing to allow lower level threats in the finished product as long as you monitor for their abuse and plan to address them in a future iteration of the cycle. Now, I'll stop with the list there. At every stage, there's security issues to be considered and potentially automated. And to me, this automation is the core, the most important feature of DevSecOps. But there are other ways people look at it. We all need to shift the mindset of workers at all stages to take security seriously and not be afraid to report what they think is a problem. How do they know what is a problem? Well, you should train them to recognize such things. Even conventional, this is what a phishing email looks like training is arguably part of this. The different security tools that we use as part of implementing DevSecOps are crucial. It's still common for developers, especially in early stages, to take the shortcut of hard coding usernames and passwords or maybe API keys into source code. You figure you'll get back to it, but then life happens and you forget. And there are tools to scan for such weaknesses and secure secrets management products to help you implement high volume, automated, secure authentication. And once again, on the subject of authentication, do you have any accounts involved with the development process that don't require some form of multi-factor authentication? This is a bad idea. But then again, you should be implementing multi-factor authentication for all your accounts in every department. And related to authentication and all of this is privilege management. Always keep the principle of least privilege in mind and deny access to any resource to users who don't have a need for it. This is usually and properly thought of as part of IAM, Identity and Access Management, which is one of those IT responsibilities, not really a dev one, but one which has serious implications for the development process, especially if you take DevOps seriously. The security of your dev tools is crucial. If your compiler or your third-party service has a vulnerability, you need to know about it ASAP and have a plan to patch or at least scan for or work around the problem. The classic DevOps cycle has discrete entry for testing or verifying early on. To the left, as we might say, there is testing that can and should happen at almost every stage. For instance, at some point after deployment, you should perform some level of penetration testing from the outside. And all of this is, in a way, part of DevSecOps. Now, I've just given you a whole lot of shoulds, and probably you don't have enough staff or budget to do it all, and probably nobody does. There are always stories coming out about how very large and sophisticated companies have a breach based on failure to implement some well-known best practice. I can't say which of the many steps you should take toward DevSecOps is the most important for you. Someone familiar with your existing systems and practices, as well as the security and product landscape, has to make that judgment. I'll come back to the automation part of it, though. Whatever you do to improve your security, try to automate it into the cycle, as well as to make sure to look at the results of the, of whatever scanning might happen. For these reasons, I have a bias towards scanning-based products because they're the most automatable ones. And there are a lot of amazing scanning products these days. There are some that can scan for both known and unknown problems. An example of a known problem is the inclusion of what is, known to be a malicious open source library. There are a lot of these. An unknown problem is more subtle. The user name and password hard-coded into the source code could qualify as this. Code which includes well-known vulnerabilities, maybe by not sanitizing inputs before using them, is such a problem. There are scanning tools that can look for these generic forms of vulnerability and find them. So also using older versions of tools then can be a big problem. And there's just many security measures that you can now automate, which you couldn't have several years ago. I'm going to close by referencing a study by IBM, their Cost of a Data Breach 2023 report. The average total cost of a data breach in 2023 in their study was $4.45 million, which is a lot to everybody. They dug deep into the details of each company in their study and the breach, and measuring 27 factors for the impact, positive or negative, on the cost of the data breach. And the largest savings, which was almost $250,000, were from a DevSecOps approach. Then they looked at the impact of those breach targets on the breach targets, with the highest as opposed to the lowest levels of DevSecOps adoption. And the cost of the data breach for those with the highest degree of DevSecOps adoption were $1.68 million, 34% less than those with the least degree of DevSecOps adoption. I think that speaks pretty well for itself. And now I'm going to pass you back to Keith for the rest of the event. I hope that you can appreciate the potential for DevSecOps to protect you and your customers, even at a time of rapid change.
Larry, what a great presentation. And thanks so much for alerting us to this. And those hard numbers at the end, boy, that's surprising and stark. The reality hitting us in the face of what happens if you don't pay enough attention to DevSecOps, going forward. It's time to start if you're not, is really the takeaway here. So Larry Seltzer, thanks so much thanks so much for joining us today, and for your time and for the information. It was really great to have you on.
Okay, thank you for having me again.
Thanks for leading us through that, Keith, and a big thanks to Larry for that awesome chat. As always, so many great takeaways, and just a perfect way to kick off our day here today. Now, before we jump into our first session, we have a question for you all, just to see if you're awake, alive, and ready to engage out there. So, what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? We got 0 to 6 months, about a year from now, 2 years. Not sure. We're kind of gauging where you are in your process. So thanks to everyone who has responded to our poll so far. And I'll give you guys a few more seconds actually, to respond. All right. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Jess to kick off today's EcoCast.
All right, Josh. Well, thank you so much for running that poll, and thank you to everyone who took some time to answer. Really cool to see where everyone's at. And I always say I like to see a lot of the not sures, because that means that we're in a place where everyone's kind of learning and exploring, and that's really exciting. And speaking of exciting, exploring new information, let's get into our very first session of the day here today. And to kick us off, starting out strong, we are going to get rolling with Kasten by Veeam. So I am very excited to introduce you all to our first expert presenter of the day, and that is Matt Slaughton, Principal Solutions Architect from Kasten by Veeam. Matt, thank you so much for being here with us to kick us off today. Excited to get rolling on this EcoCast. So I'm going to step back and hand things on over to you. Take it away, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you. So excited to be here today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are sitting today or this time. And thank you for joining us for this quick webinar presented by Kasten by Veeam. Today, we're going to be focused on adopting and accelerating DevSecOps and how Kasten by Veeam can help you with that. My name is Matt Slaughton. I'm a Principal Solution Architect here at Kasten, focused primarily on cloud partnerships, but generally speaking, also product and security. So excited to talk to you about that today. We have a lot of land to cover, so I'm going to move pretty quickly. But please, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or ask them at the end, and we'll try to get to them as we go. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in to accelerating DevSecOps. So you mentioned these housekeeping, so I'm going to shoot through that real quick. So agenda. So why does ransomware and security matter? Let's lay the landscape. Why are we having this discussion today? Why are we talking about this? I'm protected. I'm fine. Are you? We should check. Number two, Kasten K10 security everywhere. How does Kasten fit in this picture? How can we help solve these security or ransomware concerns, or at least help mitigate them? Prevention, mitigation, recovery, and of course, question and answer. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So why does ransomware security matter? It does matter, just to throw it out there, as we can all see in the real world. A lot of these are actually out of date, well out of date now, if you look at the dates of these headlines. Recently, there's been a big one, obviously, with some Las Vegas casinos here in the States around some ransomware attacks, as well as just general compromised security. Needless to say, it is becoming more and more pervasive, and we are seeing it more and more as consumers in our daily lives as enterprises are impacted by things like malware or ransomware or these cyber attacks. And obviously, all these attacks have collateral cost, right? So we're actually seeing more and more. It should be a surprise to no one that the insurance industry obviously is involved in these ransomware attacks. Obviously, if it exists in our world today, you can probably insure it. But as a result of these increasing ransomware attacks, we're seeing insurance premiums go up for organizations. You can see here a couple examples with both attackers and dates and what the estimated insurance payout is. Aside from just the actual payout that we're seeing lost income, right? So unavailability of services, right? So we're talking about casinos in Vegas is, people couldn't check into the rooms. People couldn't actually, they were manually having to do slots. So talking about lost income is, just the velocity of the casinos has slowed down, right? In that example. Likewise, a couple years ago, there was a big gas pipeline in the Southeast United States that was impacted by a big ransomware attack. They shut down the pipeline. So talk about lost income. That means pumps are not running and fuel's not being purchased. So, it's pretty intuitive, but worth mentioning there. Also, looking at remediation and response, right? Having to fix these vulnerabilities and restore operations, right? You have to basically take your organization, take them away from business as usual and have them completely focus on trying to restore and recover, basically stop innovating, everything stops in a track. So, opportunity cost is high there. Obviously, extortion, data leakage, that's a big concern, both from customer data perspective as well as reputation. So, very much a true cost there in terms of, will your organization survive this potential data leak? And of course, that kind of turns into last one losses and customer churn, brand and equity loss, right? Who's going to stop your customers going to another competitor that maybe didn't have a ransomware attack or their name dragged through the mud, unfortunately, as a result of a security breach. So recent Veeam ransomware report, just to underscore some of these numbers that we're seeing quite a bit of increase. This actually is somewhat out of date, 12% year-over-year increase in ransomware attacks. This is going up. Over 80% of organizations have seen ransomware attacks in this past year. And again, we suspect that's actually higher now. And 41% of these companies have a do not pay policy. Makes sense because it's only going to encourage more ransomware attacks. But ironically, when push comes to shove, we see that 80% of people targeted with an attack paid the ransom. In the case of that big gas pipeline, they were able to recover their data pretty quickly, but they still paid the ransom nonetheless because it was the fastest way to essentially ensure that they could unlock and let fuel start flowing again. 1 in 4 weren't able to recover even after paying the ransom. Obviously, this is terrifying. We're looking at millions and millions of dollars. Obviously, potential risk with, cryptocurrency, be able to not trace this currency. Once it's gone, and you don't have your data. So what are you left with? And then 93% of these ransomware attacks targeted backups. So really important here, obviously, Kasten, Veeam, if you aren't aware, we are focused on backup and data protection. So obviously we can, not to ruin the surprise, but we can help protect these backups to ensure that they're not vulnerable to these ransomware attacks. So a couple things to note, we're looking at Kubernetes, right? So hopefully Kubernetes is not a new word or a bad word for the audience here, but just high level, it's cloud native, containerized applications, right? So for those unfamiliar, it's a new approach to delivering applications quickly to our customers, to our enterprises. But fundamentally, obviously, we need to look at backups differently when it comes to Kubernetes because it's not the same thing as running traditional servers or virtualization. So kind of 3 key pillars here that we focus on. More than just backup, when you focus on data recovery, right? Your ability to backup is only as good as your ability to recover. I could be taking tons of backups. That's great. But if I can't actually restore from that backup, what's the point? Why do I even back up? Data security, obviously focused on that in this DevSecOps discussion. We need to make sure that we protect our backups, right? So we need to make sure we avoid these ransomware attacks, make sure that our backups are audible and auditable, not audible, so you can hear them, auditable and immutable, so that they can't be modified after the fact, right? So this is a really good example with Kubernetes. In fact, again, not to spoil the surprise, but Kubernetes obviously itself can be, one thing we like to embrace is the ephemeral nature of Kubernetes, right? So if you are compromised, if you have an environment that's compromised, you can basically leave that in the dust and provision a new Kubernetes cluster, maybe in a public cloud that is a known good. And you can essentially take your immutable backups and restore those to that known good new cloud. So that way you're not potentially pulling data over. Obviously, you need to choose a backup date and time before the ransomware attack. But nonetheless, the capabilities and mechanisms are there to essentially leverage a known good. So you know you're not basically carrying forward ransomware. And that goes into data freedom, ability to move workloads, right? So in the case of ransomware, going to a known good, or even just from a cloud cost perspective or disaster recovery, right? One really nice thing about Kasten, which we'll talk about for a minute, is our ability to transform data as it's moved. So we can actually spin down the number of replicas of pods, so essentially reduce the amount of workload. So you can have a hot, warm approach to your disaster recovery. So maybe you have 10 replicas in production and then 1 replica in the warm site. And that way, if there's a disaster in your primary site, you can increase the number of replicas in your disaster recovery site, quickly spin up, and then you have your full capacity running, but you're also minimizing costs. So moving forward, just a little bit more about Kasten and why we are different. We are the number one in Kubernetes data protection for a number of reasons. Number one, we are Kubernetes native. We're not just a bolt-on service. Also, we are not a storage company. A really important differentiator there is we are not trying to sell disk. We're not trying to sell metal. We are agnostic to Kubernetes versions. We are agnostic to disk. We are basically, we play with everybody, right? Nicely. We also contribute a lot to the ecosystem, the open source ecosystem. It's really important there when you're looking at backup solutions, particularly for Kubernetes. A lot of backup vendors or storage providers essentially say they protect Kubernetes, but they're not Kubernetes native. So it's kind of a hook in, it's kind of an afterthought, it's more of a checkbox, whereas Kasten is built in Kubernetes, so we're able to embrace the benefits of Kubernetes. So things like when we're performing backups, we can actually spin up pods as we perform the backup and spin them down when they're not needed to minimize resource utilization and cost. Also, because we're in Kubernetes, we can interrogate namespaces dynamically. We see them spun up, we can see them spun down. So really important there for very agile environments where developers might be spinning up and spinning down developments quickly. We can actually see those and protect them out of the box using things as like policy as code, which we'll talk about in a minute. I'm trying to move a little bit quicker just because I'm aware of time here. So security everywhere. We talk about ransomware immutability, really important there. We support any S3 compatible storage with immutability. And also we have integration with our parent company, Veeam VBR, which has immutability and indelibility for their backups. So really important there in that ransomware story, again, making sure that we're not manipulating these backups after they're taken. Easy to use, really important there too, especially for something like Kubernetes. Kubernetes skills are in shortage, right? So finding good Kubernetes platform engineers is difficult, and we don't want them focused on having to script and modify or tweak just backup policies, right? We want to make it easy, simple, friendly, and especially for those administrators that are maybe moving from traditional infrastructure to Kubernetes, we want to make sure we give them a nice, friendly user interface where they can actually configure all these backup policies, see these workloads. At the same time, anything that we do in the interface, we can export the equivalent of YAML. So we can actually include it as part of our pipelines. We can, if we want to, we can get our hands dirty and start playing with some YAML and policy as code. And as mentioned before, full ecosystem support, multiple storage vendors, Kubernetes distributions. You'll see in a little bit towards the end, the number of partners that we work with. So really important security everywhere across the process, right? So development, deployment, operations. This is a heavy slide. I'm not going to read through all of it. Just know that from a development perspective within Kasten, we actually release new releases every 2 weeks. We ensure that we are releasing the most secure images in our code, and we can actually perform SBOM or provide SBOMs upon request. And we have policy guardrails. And essentially, you can implement policy guardrails with Kasten K10 in your organization as part of your CI/CD pipeline. In terms of deployment, obviously we support multiple authentication and authorization mechanisms. We can get very granular with our RBAC because we actually leverage Kubernetes native RBAC. So things like cluster role bindings and role bindings. So you can get very granular in terms of what administrators can see what. Maybe one organization wants one person to be able to back up only one namespace, or maybe one organization wants to be able to report across all namespaces but not perform operations. We support all of those, that matrix of RBAC. And we mentioned ransomware protection in terms of object lock and VBR. Operations, RBAC, we talked about that too, and auditing. So we can actually see everything that's being performed. We can fully audit that log and then integrate with things like Red Hat Advanced Cluster Security. So we can actually proactively alert or monitor as things are being manipulated in the environment. And this is a slide from our parent company, but obviously we fold into, from a Cast perspective, how to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover in the event of some sort of disaster or ransomware attack. So again, I'll leave that up for a second. I'm not going to read through it, but hopefully this resonates with some of the audience here, and this looks familiar. The key here is that we can integrate with a ton of tools because we are Kubernetes native. So that is, things like Argo CD, Kyverno policies, like I said, Red Hat Advanced Cluster Security. We're able to have proactive ransomware detection and alert, and actually automate our response in light of those ransomware attacks. So here's our DevSecOps. I didn't mention in the beginning, and I think everybody, well, in case everybody isn't on the call, doesn't know on the call, DevSecOps is a culture. It is not just a product. You can't buy DevSecOps. Wanted to lay that out here, but Kasten fits in nicely into the picture of DevSecOps. So as your organization embraces the culture of development security operations, obviously we can fully integrate with the different areas of the stack, starting with Dev, like I said, Argo CD, deploying to OpenShift, using things like GitLab pipeline, and Kyverno, policy as code. In terms of security, integrating with tools like Red Hat Advanced Security, we have a number of blogs and integration points, and AWS Guard Duty, and operations, obviously, be able to monitor everything using things like Grafana, native Kubernetes tools, and then we are actually adding the SIEM integration, or security incident and event management integration here shortly. So how do we prevent our backups? How do we prevent this from the outset, right? So we want to make sure that our backups are always encrypted. Really nice thing about Kasten is they always are. You cannot turn off encryption. In fact, so whenever we move data offsite, so like to an S3 compatible repository or S3 itself or Azure Blob, end-to-end encryption is on by default. You cannot turn it off. And we have the option to leverage third-party keys. So if you're using HashiCorp Vault or AWS Key Management Service, you can specify the key. Otherwise, the key is managed by Kasten itself. And obviously, privacy and compliance concerns, we independently store those keys outside of your data resides. See, anyone familiar with Kubernetes and secrets and how that works? We're not just throwing secrets up in code. We make sure that we keep that outside, and so that you as the customer can store that separately to protect your data. Nice, some screenshots just of how we can integrate RBAC, define and assign roles, and generate infrastructure as code for automation. Again, really useful there because we are Kubernetes native. Everything can be exported via YAML and integrate as part of pipeline. Backup immutability. So the answer here, again, S3 immutability using S3 storage, S3 compatibility, defining K10 backup policy, including our retention timeframes. So we're going to make sure that our retention matches our business SLA, RTO, and RPO requirements. We can protect against malware, ransomware, and human error, right? Because we can restore from our backups very easily within Kubernetes. Ransomware aside, if I am an administrator and maybe I push some bad code, or maybe I corrupt my database or what have you, it's very easy to restore very quickly from our web UI or programmatically via our integrations. We talked about support for Veeam hardened repository. Veeam VBR 12 introduced indelibility into the repository. We are a Veeam company again, so we fully integrate with Veeam VBR, although it's not required. So if you do not have Veeam today, but you have a Kubernetes distribution that you need to protect, Kasten can still help you. We are deployed again within Kubernetes, so we integrate with Veeam, but we are not part of VBR. And then Kasten K10 will periodically check immutable repositories and provide alerts in case we see that the repository either is deleted or if certain conditions aren't met. Maybe for some reason the immutability flag has been turned off. So policy guardrails, and again, moving quickly here, guys. I know all of our time's important here. Data protection policy guardrails. We mentioned RBAC before. We can be very granular in terms of what access we grant to Kasten K10 APIs. Obviously using native Kubernetes concepts like services, stateful sets, and secrets, and using policy guardrails such as policy as code to define our recovery point objectives. You see here, bottom stat here, 81% of popular infrastructure as code platforms, community providers provide modules fail to enable backup and recover properly. Really important there. It's not at the forefront of a lot of developers' minds, right? The developers just want to get their code out and running. But at the end of the day, what happens if some of that data is deleted or something happens in the pipeline? We need to be able to recover that. So definitely something to be aware of for your organization, whether you're a developer, whether you're a backup administrator, or a platform engineer. So data protection guardrails, we mentioned policy as code. So things like Argo CD, see obviously GitHub Actions integration, obviously really good for developers, and that, when we want to use code, we can use code. We don't have to use our UI, or we can check things in the UI, right? So again, You can configure a protection policy in the UI and then export the YAML for that. You can get immediate feedback at the time of commit. So once we actually commit code to our repositories, you can actually get feedback from that and see, hey, do we have a policy in place? Can Casting Key 10 protect this? You're good to go. Move it to production, or we can actually stop the rollout if there is no policy in place to protect the workload being deployed as part of the pipeline. Admission control, obviously really important here too. This goes back to, look, if we don't have a policy in place, don't let the application go into production. It's really useful for cloud ops data protection specialists. We get instant feedback during deployment of apps and infrastructure. Basically, we can block admission of the application unless there is a data protection policy in place. Nice shot here of our cluster policy using Kyverno. Again, there's a really good blog post if you go to kasten.io that outlines how you can do this with Kyverno policies.
In this demo, we're going to use Kyverno again.
Oop, I want to keep on moving there. Sorry. Detection and mitigation. So we've got, we're nearing the end, guys, so I appreciate you sticking around, and I definitely want to get to the Q&A because I'm sure there's some good questions in the chat. So ransomware attack detection, again, because we are Kubernetes native, we can integrate with Kubernetes native applications and monitoring tools. We can automatically detect when there is a ransomware attack and respond appropriately, right? So we can have rapid response, we said, because we are programmatically accessible and have full APIs and are Kubernetes native, you can actually trigger actions based on detections, right? So in the case of, let's say that, we have some sort of issue where advanced cluster security detects some sort of issue or ransomware attack, we can actually automatically fail over. You could absolutely script end-to-end a big red button to perform a disaster recovery for your Kubernetes workloads. Really useful there. And obviously, at the time, a lot of organizations say, oh, it's a problem. I don't need to worry about that until it is a problem. And then suddenly you're scrambling. Obviously, the beauty of Kasten and our APIs and Kubernetes native YAML is that we can actually get ahead of time and make sure that we have that big red button available for when it does matter. This just shows advanced cluster security. We are closely partnering with Red Hat. A lot of our customer base is running OpenShift, and obviously as part of the OpenShift platform plus ACS is an offering, right? So again, this provides great observability and monitoring around security and compliance of our clusters, and we can fully integrate with that for our security posture management. Again, really good blog post on kasten.io on this. For runtime advanced threat detection, we also integrate with Amazon GuardDuty. Similarly, we can basically bridge that gap, teams across infrastructure, application management, and provide additional visibility into suspicious activity, whether it's malicious IPs or unauthenticated users trying to access our backups. We've plenty of partnerships, which we'll get to here in a second. We are currently working on being onboarded into Iron Bank's hardened container image repository. We talked about some of our orchestration automated response engines and information and event management support. Keep an eye out for that, especially ahead of KubeCon. We've got some big announcements coming in that space. Oop, I don't think we have a poll, so we're going to skip past that. So recovery, real quick, last couple slides here. Recover anywhere, anytime. We talked about application mobility. So basically able to recover to any supported cloud storage provider anytime. We are not a storage vendor. We are platform agnostic, much like our parent company, Veeam and VBR. We have granular artifact recovery. We can restore certain artifacts from backup. You don't have to do the kitchen sink. You can do one specific PVC or secret or what have you. Our K10 disaster recovery, we can store K10 to an alternative platform. So our disaster recovery itself, you can actually, to protect K10, you can basically redeploy K10, you can reseed our catalog and then essentially reseed your workloads. And then we support Veeam instant recovery if you're running vSphere environments. We can actually bring our workloads back online almost immediately from their backup storage. So with that, last couple of slides before we get to questions, and I know conscious of time here, so I want to throw out here, this is our ecosystem support. This is a lot what I focus on. Just note that all the big players we basically can integrate with. There's some even missing on this slide. If it's a Kubernetes distribution, if there's a CSI driver that supports volume snapshots, we essentially work with them. All right, so let's go ahead and jump to questions. We kind of recapped there towards the end. So Jess, are there any questions in the chat?
Yes, there are. In fact, we have so many questions that we're only going to get to a few in the last few minutes. Matt, before I jump in, I do want to say thank you so much for that awesome presentation. What a cool walkthrough and really interesting to kind of see all those pieces coming together. I know that this resonated a lot with the audience because we are more questions than we're going to have time for. But let's start with this one here. How can Kasten K10 provide more automated data protection than something free like Valero?
Great question. We often hear this a lot. So Valero is, for those unaware, is a free and open source solution. You can see it on GitHub today. Valero is interesting. I guess, number one, there is no UI for Valero. So talk about kind of that usability and granular control. You end up having to do a lot of YAML manipulation. So, and also if you're deploying new namespaces, you end up having to manually configure those new namespaces in your Valero policies. So you don't have that automation necessarily. And yes, you could script it, but it's just a lot more work, right? So we talked about opportunity cost and ease of use. So definitely Kasten's got some strengths there. And the last thing I'll say too is immutability, S3 object storage. We support S3 immutability today. I think Valero, they're starting to, but it's slow coming, and it's an open source project. So we don't know, that could be in a month or it could be in 2 years, depending on the amount of contribution and engineers working on that.
Sure. Yeah. Always a bit of an unknown there. Okay. Sneaking in a few more questions here. How can Kasten help with data sovereignty requirements? What do you got for us?
Great question. And again, this comes up a lot too, especially among our defense or federal customers, our government customers, is because we have the ability to configure multiple location profiles within Kasten, we can ensure that our data or specific workloads are only sent to specific clouds, right? So we can make sure that if we're in like AWS Gov Cloud, that's a no-brainer, but we can make sure that the S3 bucket we're sending to is on US soil, or if we're in Europe, and make sure that we are leveraging the correct geographies, and we can actually enforce those data sovereignty policies using things like policy as code and native K10 policies as well.
Perfect. Okay. You are cruising through these, so we are going to have time for one last question. Let's see here. Let's go with this one. What's Kasten's recommended approach to recover in the event of a ransomware attack? So I think we've got a couple of questions coming in about best practices. This might be a great time to address that.
Awesome. Love it. I'm actually working with some colleagues right now. We have a best practice guide. If it's not out yet, it will be very shortly. So check it out on docs.kasten.io. But yes, in terms of ransomware, I know we touched upon that a little bit, but really kind of the gold standard and what we recommend for our customers, if they can do it, is really to just deploy new. Obviously, if you can, in a separate air-gapped infrastructure, or completely maybe a public cloud provider, if only temporarily, right? So if you're running your production workloads in one data center that's been exposed to ransomware, the risk of performing disaster recovery is that you carry that ransomware over with you to your secondary site. So by using essentially an air-gapped or a separate environment, we essentially have a known good. So again, embracing the benefits of Kubernetes is we can quickly spin up clusters, especially if you're using something like OpenShift, where you essentially have the same nice management interface. You can use the same thing like RBAC or Okta for OAuth and OpenShift. Basically spin up a known good. You can recover your snapshots using K10 before that ransomware attack ever occurred, and then essentially restore that to the new cloud. So it's a known good, it's known fresh. You are not bringing that ransomware in there. Obviously, you'll need to work with your security operations center to make sure that whatever led to that ransomware attack to begin with has been patched in the new environment. But high level, that's definitely what we recommend is leverage that clean, fresh environment. That way you're not pulling over that nasty ransomware.
Who doesn't like a clean, fresh environment? That's a great takeaway. And Matt, I'm going to stop asking you questions now because you're recovering from a cold, and I can hear that closing up in your throat there. So we're gonna give you some good time to go drink water. Before you leave us, though, if somebody out there really wants to get started with Kasten by Veeam, what do you recommend as that first step?
Absolutely. So I think I have a slide here. Oh, no, we're going to the hidden slides now. So definitely no slides. Yeah. Check out Kasten.io. That is our website, or go to veeam.com as well. You can actually try Kasten for free for up to 5 worker nodes. It's fully featured. So if you have a Kubernetes cluster today or want to spin one up quickly, we can support single node, but the first 5 nodes are completely free. So definitely check out Kasten.io. You'll see a link to the free download, free demo, and there's tons of material content out there. We're constantly pushing stuff out. I've got a really good Red Hat OpenShift demo on YouTube. Lots of stuff coming out. So check us out, and definitely keep an eye on us. We're constantly innovating.
You are a constant fountain of resources there, Matt. That was a lot of cool takeaways all in one go. No, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming to talk to us today, even though I know it was a bit tricky for you. Thank you for being here with us. And you had mentioned a poll in your presentation. We do actually have one. We just bumped it to the end. So we're gonna head to that in just a moment here. But Matt, one last time, thank you so much for being here with us.
Always a pleasure, Jess. Thank you for having me. And we'll see you in the next one pretty soon, hopefully.
I hope so.
Big thank you again to Matt for being here for that great conversation. We got that poll question that Jess mentioned up on your screen. What additional information would you like about the casting solution? So here's your chance to get some white papers, customer case studies, pricing details from casting. Big thank you to everyone filling out the poll or anybody who asked a question. If you want to learn more right away, check out the handouts tab and click on the Casting by Veeam handout. Here's your chance to download the K10 data sheet. Also, keep those questions coming in. We'll make sure the Casting by Veeam team has your questions to follow up after the EcoCast today. I'm going to give you guys a few more seconds to click on that poll. Make sure you get the information in for casting. And we're going to keep this EcoCast going. I'm going to pass it back to Jess to introduce our next presenter. Actually, I take that back. I have something even better for you guys. While you guys are thinking of more questions, we have a $300 Amazon gift card to give away, and a quick reminder, you must be present during the webinar to win. So our very first lucky winner here with us today is Michael Livingston of Wisconsin. Michael, congratulations. As always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after the webinar. And don't forget that there are still two more chances to win an Amazon gift card today, plus that Best Questions gift card from each session. Now, let's get ready to jump back into the EcoCast. Just who do we have up next?
All right. Well, thanks again, Josh, for running us through that poll. Some great information coming in. And folks, with that, we are moving on to our next and last presentation of the EcoCast today. But don't worry, because we are definitely ending on a high note. We've got some great information planned for you. And that is, of course, going to come from the Progress Software team, as you can see. So our final incredible expert here with us today is Donald Slanek, Senior Sales Engineer at Progress Software. Donald, I am so excited to see what you've got in store for us, dig into what's up at Progress. So I'm going to step back and hand things on over to you. Take it away, Donald.
Hello, and thanks for joining me for today's session. My name is Don Slanek. I'm a senior sales engineer with Progress. And today I'm here to talk about making DevSecOps a shared reality. So we'll start with just a quick discussion of some of the challenges with DevSecOps and getting that going. And then we'll tackle one of the main methods that we see successful in achieving a DevSecOps practice, and that is policy as code. So we'll talk through that a bit. We'll take a look at what some of that looks like in action. And then we'll leave time at the end if you have any questions around what we talked about today, or Chef in general, or even DevSecOps in general. So we all know DevOps has been kind of the main initiative for most, if not all, companies in the tech space for the last few years. So we all kind of know the benefits of merging those two teams together, making a unified process. But what's kind of new is actually DevSecOps, so integrating security into that process. So over the last few years, we've seen a proliferation in the amount of cyber attacks and ransomware attacks that have occurred. And we've seen these attacks become even more sophisticated. So, as you check the news, it's almost daily that there's a new attack and a new methodology that attackers are using in order to, gain access to systems unlawfully, expedite data, what have you. And so a lot of organizations are trying to shift to that DevSecOps model of getting security in there earlier. But what we found with talking with these companies is that not many companies feel confident in achieving that. So as you can see here, only 30% really feel confident in what the amount of collaboration and the effectiveness of that collaboration between security development teams. And over half have admitted that they don't really understand how security fits into that DevOps world. That vision is really hard to see. And so really the key for a lot of DevSecOps initiatives, and where we've seen a lot of that kind of fail for companies, it's not necessarily the technology, it's the process. So when you look at these teams, so development teams, operation teams, security teams, compliance teams, historically, they've always worked in their own silos. So they've had their own tools, techniques, processes, and they've gotten really good at honing in on those and running through them. Well, when you look at DevSecOps, now all of a sudden, instead of running my processes in a silo with my own team, I'm tossed into a room with other teams with their own processes, and the expectation is we need to collaborate and work together as one. Well, the challenge is you have that momentum, and so as these teams get tossed together, there could be a lot of friction and a lot of trouble with trying to find what that unified process looks like. So how do we work together? How do we play nicely? We all have the same goals of making our organization both secure and successful, but how can we achieve that together? And so really the key is to get all these teams working with not necessarily a unified process, but unified data. So, as we work, the data I'm sharing with the other teams and the data I'm receiving should all be unified. It should all be the same. And so that way, as we communicate and work together, we're all working from the same data set. And now, if you're looking at this from a historical perspective, that's extremely hard, right? So if I'm compliance, maybe I've worked a lot with Excel. Maybe if I'm a security team, I've worked with some vendor tools and maybe some command line tools. And then, DevOps has their own pipelines for tools for pipelines and code management and things like that. So it can be really tricky. It's easier said than done, right? It's one thing to say, yep, we all need a unified language to speak, but how do you implement that? And so that's where Chef and really policy as code comes into play. So what policy as code is it's one unified document that you can use to specify not only how an environment should be configured and set up, but how we should test it. What that environment should do. And then from a security perspective, what security controls does it need to implement and achieve, and what security levels do we need to hit in order for this environment to be successful? And so the key is, where historically that would be stored in 3 or 4 different systems, policy as code takes it all and puts it into one document that we can all look at. So what it really does is unifies the information model of our environment that we're all working off of. So what it enables you to do is not only collaborate easier, because again, we're looking at one single source of the data. It allows you to really quickly increase your scalability of these processes across your organization, because you can not only have this one unified method. So once we run through it once, we understand how it works and we can do it. We can use this as templates for other environments. So maybe I have a policy as code for a cloud environment in AWS. If I'm spinning up a new environment, I can use what I've already done as a template and then tweak and adjust it for that particular use case. And then as we go through and we implement the the initial version of the system we're building out, and we're adding iterative improvements to it, we can continuously have that visibility and see between those versions what changed. So if I want to see what configuration changes were made or what versions of things were deployed, I can really quickly look at the latest version of my policy as code. I can look at the historical versions and I can compare really quickly. And so within a DevSecOps team, what that really looks like is kind of 3 phases, right? So the first is creating and testing those policies. So this is going to be your local development. So, we'll create those, we'll test them locally. They'll go through a dev environment. And then what we're going to do is we're going to lock that policy down, and then we push it out to our environments. So whether, it doesn't matter if they're cloud, on-prem, if they're edge devices, and we let those run. And so those will run continuously. And then ultimately, as they run, they're going to report their state in a method that we can then use to actually monitor and report on those. So it's one thing to create the environment, but we want to have full visibility into what's going on and make sure that things are going as we expect them to. And so as we look into that, there's a wide variety of environments we're working off of, right? So, for the longest time, it's been on-prem, and then we went to VMs, and then we went to containerization, then we went to the cloud. And so it's key to actually have something that can manage all those environments with the same methodology. So a while ago, it was okay if we had like on-prem and then maybe VMs. We could have customized processes for each of those because there was only 2 environments that were running. But now with the way that not only technology is proliferating, but also the way organizations are under more and more pressure to iterate faster and to innovate faster. We have to have a method that we can then apply to any environment really quickly and rapidly. And so that's what you can see here is not only, do you need to scale, but also whatever systems you use to configure the systems and deploy systems, and whatever system you use to secure them have to be unified across all those. And that's the goal of Chef really as a whole, is to make it so that way the same process and the same policies and the policies as code can run across all these environments really quickly and easily. And so the way we do it is we split it up into kind of two main focuses. So the first one's going to be the infrastructure management side of things. So this is actually taking whatever that base environment is and configuring it and setting it up to the way that we want. So maybe you want to set up a database server and have it configured a specific way. We allow you to put that in that policy and have it configured that way. But then also on top of that is the compliance side or the security side. And so this is making sure that those systems hit whatever security requirements we have and are configured in the way that they should be. So, not only creating it and checking it, but also verifying it. And so from our perspective, it doesn't matter if that's like an internal check that you create. So maybe you have your own organizational security standards that you have to hit, but also publicly available ones as well. So like CIS and DISA-STIG or PCI or HIPAA, integrating those into the process as well to make sure that not only are our internal targets hit, but those external regulatory requirements are hit as well. And so really, as we implement policy as code, you get a lot of benefits and a lot of power just from that simple paradigm shift, right? So as we go through, it's really easy to test policy as code because you're only testing one unit of change. So all my changes are occurring in that single deployable artifact. So, you're not trying to troubleshoot, 5 or 10 different artifacts we deployed and which one's changing what. It's all just there. There's no clients or pipelines really that you have to apply or add on additionally to what you're already using. So, if you are a DevOps organization already and you have a CI/CD pipeline that you're running, you don't need to replace it. Our goal is always to slot into whatever that process is currently in as quick and easy as manner as possible. And on top of that, this really simplifies that path to production and the promotional changes between environments. So with a lot of historical development, you've always had to spend a little bit of time as we go from development to stage to user acceptance to production, making sure that whatever I deployed is identical to what was tested in the lower environment. But with the way that policy as code and specifically Chef works, when we create that policy and we say, yep, I want to make this deployable, it gets version locked down. So what we do is actually create one single deploy artifact that gets checksummed. And then as I run that through those environments, it's going to always verify that those checksums never change. So whatever I create in dev is going to be what I end up running in production. So not only do I have a lot of confidence in what I'm running in production has been fully tested, but I've also got another security layer on top of that of if there was an attack on my pipeline or a dependency attack in my environment, I can really quickly identify, hey, something was changed as this was getting promoted up, and Chef will automatically say, yep, that checksum didn't match, decline promoting this environment. So another layer of security in terms of your dependency management there. But it works with all different types of infrastructure. So it doesn't matter if you're on-prem, cloud, containerization, VM, whatever you're running, this is going to run in the same methodology, in the same framework. So again, no custom things per environment that you have to do. And that really allows organizations to be really flexible, right? So as we work now, you might have initiatives where you're doing a lift and shift or you're doing a cloud migration, or you might have business initiatives where we're going multi-cloud, where we need to be able to transition between cloud providers really quickly and easily. This works with all of that. So from our perspective, when you're ready to make that change, you just tell us what that new endpoint is or what that new environment is, and it gets set up for you automatically. All the logic around things that have to happen, what steps have to happen for each provider and what each type of system, that all gets handled in the background for you. So you just tell us, hey, I want this web server here, and we help manage that for you. And then again, it's a single source of truth. So If I'm a security engineer, I might not have full knowledge or visibility into my development team and how they work, but I can see what that outcome is because I'm able to inspect that policy file and see exactly how things are set up and how my things are interacting with them. So as we talk about shifting security left and more quicker into that process, I can get started right away. So as my development team is building out the environment, I can build those security compliance checks alongside them. And so when we're ready to promote the code to be, in my dev environments and higher up to get ready to deploy to production, I don't have to scramble to try to write those checks. They're already there, and it should really limit the surprises. And it goes both ways as well. If I'm a developer, I don't have to worry about getting hit with the last minute security changes. I try to, go to production. I can run the security checks earlier in that process, and I can fix those security issues before I ever, mark it eligible to promote and deploy, because they're available to me earlier. So it really reduces that friction because we're both teams are talking, what they're working on a lot sooner in that process instead of, tossing something over the wall. So I want to highlight this use case. So Chef recently has partnered or worked with SAP to help with some of their security compliance needs. So as you might all know, SAP is a large company, and as such, they have a really large cloud presence. So, in our particular case, they had about 11 million different cloud resources that they wanted to inspect for security and compliance needs or requirements. And the challenge was not only was the sheer number of that, but also it's spread across all different types of clouds, all different types of geolocations. And it was really just a global operation. And so SAP actually called in Chef to help with that process. And so not only, and it kind of highlights the importance of not only, we've hammered home that, hey, whatever the environment is, you need one unified way to work with it, because it makes it easier for your teams to not only learn that process, but really hone in and iterate on top of that. But you have to be able to scale it as well. So whatever methodology you use, if it doesn't scale, you're going to find a Band-Aid fix, to try to get around it. And that, thinking, hey, we'll fix it later, and later never comes. And then you end up with disjointed processes. And so right out the bat, they pulled Chef in to cover all those. So, we're looking at 11 million different resources, and we scan those in about 3 hours. So historically, if you were trying to scan that, it would be really hard and labor intensive in order to try to do that. And, it would take months and huge teams to do it. Now with automation and with Chef, we can do that in 3 hours, and we can run that continuously. Again, a key concept of DevSecOps is you should be running these checks continuously. And not only that, it's across 9,500 different accounts. So that way, from our perspective, you don't have someone logging in individual accounts. It's just one unified tool that manages all that for you. And so how do we actually perform this, in action? What does that look like? Well, Chef provides, not only that configuration code, that configuration functionality, but also the compliance side. But it can be tricky to implement compliance and security standards on my environment, right? So if it can be a big burden if you have to build those from scratch. Maybe we don't necessarily have a lot of shared security requirements, or we're just getting started in that. So Chef provides what we call premium content, which are pre-built, ready to go security templates based on popular standards like CIS and STIG that allow you to really quickly apply their standards to your systems. And then you can use that as a template to get started. So over time, as you want to add to that or subtract to it, you can, but this really helps you get a jump start for your initiatives. And so as you can see here, they cover a wide variety of different systems. They're constantly updated. So they are, as new standards and new technologies get released, these get updated to match those. And, the big focus has been on communication and, shared data. And with Chef Automate, it serves as kind of a single portal that you can use to view all the data, no matter what team you're on. So As you can see here, we can see a Chef infrastructure run. So this is configuring a system to be in a state that I want it to be in. This runs continuously, so I can take a look at what the latest run is. I can look at the historical view of that and see what actual physical changes were made on the machine. And very similarly, I can see the compliance side of that. So in this case, I'm looking at my environment. I've got 5 servers. They all failed a compliance check. And so I can again go through the list really quickly and see which ones failed and correct those, either automatically through auto remediation. So Chef can fix those for you automatically. Or if you want to manually remediate those, you can do that as well. So maybe it's a very sensitive setting. I can go ahead and just flag it, alert the team, and then the team can fix it. And then here's what one of those checks looks like. And again, this is designed to be human readable. So you don't have to be a developer to really understand what's going on or even to create these. So as we look, each of these controls or compliance checks or security checks is going to have a title. It'll have a description of what it's checking, why it's important. It's going to have an impact score that goes from 0 to 1, 0 being informational, 1 being, this is mission critical. And then as you look in the bottom, you'll see that describe block. That's the actual code, or that's the actual work being done to check to make sure this, the security or compliance check, control is in place. And again, as you can see, designed to be human readable. And it's, as I read it, I can say, okay, in this case, that describe block there, I have a kernel module on my Linux system here. It should not be loaded. It should be disabled and should be blacklisted. So, if I'm trying to, if I'm not a developer, maybe I'm an auditor, I don't need to know programming to understand what that's checking. I can really quickly read it. And then, with a quick look through the extensive documentation, I can modify and edit it as, if I need to. So that's really the goal for not only successful DevSecOps teams, but also that we try to instill with our customers is getting on the same page in terms of data and increasing that visibility across all those teams in a format that they can really not only understand, but rapidly ingest and use to improve their work and efficiencies. So that way you can spend less time working on, the management side of things and more time working on the forward moving work that helps the organization move forward. So thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it. And I'd like to open up if there's any questions.
Okay, well, Don, great presentation. Are you ready for some questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, super. And as we look at what questions are coming in here, I'll just briefly mention that we've got a poll question here for everybody. We're wondering what additional information you all would like about the Progress solution. You can see all the options up there. And so we'll just leave that up throughout the Q&A here. But let's see, Don, first question we've got here comes from Angela. She's wondering, how do we ensure that security is not a bottleneck in our DevSecOps pipeline, and what measures are in place to balance security with the need for rapid development?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And I think that's something we've seen in a lot of companies. And when I was a developer, it was something I dealt with. It can be really easy to get frustrated with security, right? Because, as a development team, we built this feature or this product. We tested it, it's ready to go. We want to just ship the thing. And then security says, oh, wait, hold on. We got to run our test and make sure it's secure. And so that can definitely add a lot of friction. What we recommend, and that's kind of the key thing we've seen really hit home with our customers doing DevSecOps, is the earlier you can get security in that process, the less that happens. So the idea being, when we start doing the initial development of something, if we can get security in there and we can discuss collaboratively, okay, what are the security requirements for this thing that we're going to be releasing? The quicker we know that in the process, the more as we build it, we can test and make sure that, yep, we are aligning and we're good. So that way, when we're done, it's not just a throw it over the wall to security and have them come back with things. It's more of a collaborative thing. It should hit 95% of what we want. And then maybe there's a few tidy up things. So the earlier we can get them in, and then it comes down to culture as well as, being open and being collaborative. And it kind of goes on both sides of the fence. So anything you can do from a culture perspective to make people willing to learn, if it's like learning sessions or lunch and learns or anything you can do to help the teams realize like, hey, we're on the same team. It's not a battle. You know, if one of us is successful, if we're all successful, the company's successful, you know, everything is good.
Yep. A lot of great stuff in there. Thank you. Next question comes from Gaurav, who's wondering what advantages Chef offers for automating compliance as compared to Puppet.
Yeah, absolutely. There's kind of a few key things. So one of the big things that we do is we see configuration and compliance being two sides of the same coin. So in terms of managing systems, yes, you want it to be configured correctly, but also like we need to audit it and make sure it is correct and it's secure. So one of the ways that we do this a little different is we've actually partnered with a lot of organizations that do like industry-wide standards for those, so like Center for Internet Security and DevSecOps for more of the government side. And what we actually do is when they publish standards of, hey, these are best practices, how to secure systems, we actually build compliance checks toward those standards. We get them certified by those standard bodies, and then we provide them to our customers to get started with. So, you know, if you're looking at it and you're like, hey, I want to add compliance to my environment, it's really daunting, right? If you're starting from ground zero and you have no frame of reference of what to check, how to check. So we provide those things that you can just get quick started right away, tweak and adjust them over time to fit your organizational needs. But then always knowing that, hey, they're certified by those bodies, and as those updates happen, you know, we're going to update it. It's owned by us, not like a third-party consulting company that some of the other people in our space use. So that's the big one. The other side of it too is we are agent-based, so that allows us to operate in a wider variety of environments. So like, you know, we're talking about multi-cloud and on-prem environments, hybrids. We're seeing a lot more edge device things where maybe you have systems in stores or maybe, you know, systems with disparate internet connections. That agent base is going to allow you to operate this environment, the same process, the unified way of managing things in all those different disparate environments. So there's no tweaks or customizations needed.
Okay.
So
all right,
those are
great.
big ones.
Yep. Next question here comes from Paul, who's wondering what training or tools does Progress offer that can help beginning to intermediate level users ramp up to utilize the range of DevSecOps features that Chef offers?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do offer kind of a wide variety of training. So we do have some good out-of-the-box training. So like things like basic usage of Chef and how do I create automation and compliance checks, things like that. But the other thing that we do too, and we pride ourselves on, is we're always willing to tailor and adjust for your particular situation. So, you know, some customers, they know kind of what their vision is and they know what they want, and it aligns with those pre-built courses, and that's great. Always happy to do them. But your organization might be different. You might be dealing with more cultural issues with getting teams to collaborate, or maybe you don't have that full vision yet and you need help. So we are always willing and able to customize that to your particular needs. And the great thing with our consultants and our professional services that we've hired is most of them are former practitioners, so they've been in your shoes. They know, you know, what challenges they face as they get, you know, maybe it's a DevOps environment, you're trying to integrate security, like they've dealt with those issues before, and they can help not only just with the Chef side of things, but also, you know, how does that implement into your organization in the most effective way possible. So a wide variety of that. And then also, if you just want to get up to speed on Chef itself really quickly, low friction, if you go to learn.chef.io, there's a great e-learning platform. It has like a full environment you can spin up and actually test and run Chef and learn how all that works as well.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, you know, there are so many questions here. Hopefully you can get to some of them after we're done here, but we're almost up on time. But I did want to ask one more from Angela, who's wondering, how do you see the future of DevSecOps evolving, and what emerging trends should organizations be aware of?
Yeah, I think in terms of DevSecOps, you're going to see a lot more integrations and a lot more comprehensive kind of requirements and needs. So historically, DevSecOps is focused very heavily on, you know, configuration of systems and applications and things. But with all the kind of the sophistication of things like ransomware and some of the more sophisticated malware attacks we're seeing, you're going to start seeing a lot more integration for other security tools, things like static code analysis and tools that analyze the dependency chains of applications. Those are going to start needing to be integrated into that DevSecOps pipeline as well. And the organizations that can do that are going to have like a leg up on just overall security and overall speed that they can move. In terms of the future of DevSecOps, I mean, just like almost everything, AI is going to be a big one in there. So, it probably is going to take a while to, for AI to, it's not going to replace any of our jobs anytime soon, in my opinion, but you're going to start seeing it in more novel ways integrated into solutions. So maybe it's not necessarily like doing the job of a DevSecOps engineer, but more of a tool that you can use to help not only troubleshoot issues, but maybe even like help with analysis and things like that. So I think DevSecOps is still really new, but so the future is kind of gray, just like it was with DevOps a while ago. But always excited to see what comes next.
Awesome. Yeah, really sounds like there's a lot to look forward to. Appreciate that. And last question for you, Don. If somebody wants to get started with Progress, what do you recommend?
If you just go to our website, so that's a great way just to get started. There's some great overviews and introductions there, and from there there's a free trial. So if you ever want to give it a shot, you can. That's probably the best way. Okay,
excellent. Well, Don, thanks so much for coming on and bringing us up to speed on Progress. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a great day.
All right, and I'm going to turn things back over to Josh Randall to bring this EcoCast home. Josh, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Donald, for being here for that great chat. And thank you to everybody who filled out the poll and asked a question. Keep those questions coming in. Again, we'll make sure that the Progress team gets your questions to follow up after today's EcoCast. And if you want to learn more right away, the Handouts tab is your best friend for that right now. Click on the Progress handout and download their white paper on their best practices associated with implementing DevSecOps. All right, we have 2 more $300 Amazon gift cards to give away. And a quick reminder that you must be present at the webinar to win. So our next 2 lucky winners are Roberto Aguero of Maryland and Charles Schaefer of North Carolina. Congratulations to Roberto and Charles. Let's do a quick rundown of all of our winners from today. We have Michael Livingston of Wisconsin, Roberto Aguero of Maryland, and Charles Schaefer of North Carolina. As always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after the webinar. Plus, there's still that best question gift card for each session. All right. If you are on the webinar today and you would like to chat with us about presenting on a future summit, EcoCast, or MegaCast webinar, we would love to hear from you. Reach out via email to connect@actualtechmedia.com. All right. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank you all for being here today. Thank our speakers from both Casting by Veeam and Progress for making this EcoCast. And I want to say thank you guys for attending and asking such great questions. I had so much fun being here today and hearing some of the specific opportunities and challenges when we talk about the common obstacles and pitfalls to DevSecOps adoption and how to overcome them. I hope you have gotten some interesting ideas and tips that help you feel a little bit more informed and equipped to tackle the biggest changes you are dreaming about at your organization. Before I take off today, mark your calendars and come back with us for tomorrow. We have a MegaCast. I'll be there. Hopefully you will be too. Secure the modern workplace, tools for protecting workers in hybrid and remote environments. We'll have experts from Rubrik, Nutanix, Keeper Security, and CyberArk presenting tomorrow. So we'll hope you guys will be there as well. I hope you guys see you again. And until then, have an absolutely beautiful rest of your day.